Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name is Jeff Thomas, and we have a very special guest with us today, a very old friend of mine. Neither one of us want to admit how old, but Craig Spencer is with us. Craig is the Director of Finance and Operations at Parent Possible, which works with children and parents all over the state of Colorado. He's had a long career in public accounting, as a finance person within public and private companies, and now in the nonprofit sector. And I really wanted to have everybody hear his story of really making a pivot from the for-profit to the nonprofit world. And it's a very unique story. So, Craig, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Jeff. It's been great to reconnect with you, and just really appreciate who you are and what you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. And right back at you. But Craig, we always start with just a little context with where you grew up, what that was like, what was your family like, were you always a numbers person, that kind of thing. Tell us what it was like growing up.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Well, I grew up in Houston and had a good childhood. I was from a split family. My mom and my dad divorced when I was 5. Yeah, I think I was 5. I have a younger sister, about a year and a half younger than me, but still had a good relationship with my dad. Kind of different from, these days I see some people who have more of a split custody, and ours wasn't like that. My mom had primary custody, and we would see our dad like every other week, and good times there. My mom actually was an accountant and a bookkeeper, and she worked really hard, a lot of times working 2 or 3 jobs. This was back in the 60s and 70s. It was not common at that time to be a divorced woman. We lived in a good neighborhood. It was a basic, neighborhood. We, had friends. We rode our bikes everywhere. It's like our friends came in, the door wasn't locked. We went in their house, they came in ours. And we rode our bike to the elementary school in the back of the neighborhood. So it was, all really good.
Was faith a part of your life growing up or not?
Yeah, I would say that he kind of put a finger on me from when I was young. And we went to an Episcopal church, and my mom would take my sister and I up there, and I think that maybe it was a competitive thing. I remember them having like a perfect attendance pin, and I would get my mom like, "Come on, we got to go to church."
I got to get my pin, man.
Yeah, I wanted to get that pin for being there every
funny.
week. And it was here, but the Episcopal and Anglican church, I think I've gotten a lot more respect for it then. At that time, it was the King James version and stand up, sit down, kneel. I didn't really understand all of that. I think it started coming alive when I was in high school. I started going to Young Life, which was great, but it was really more that's where the cool kids were and the cute girls were. But I started meeting people and hearing messages that really resonated with me more than what I would have at church. And we had worship songs that were neat, and there were these guys leading it that seemed really cool. I look back, they were probably in their early 20s, but they seemed older but cool, and they had a beard and played music. And so I reconnected more at that time.
Yeah. And then you go off to the University of Texas, right? And I mean, obviously studied accounting because we were in public accounting together. I got there a little after you were, but tell us about your college years.
It was interesting. I went to a big high school in Houston, and we may have had a guidance counselor. If there was, I never met him or knew. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I got out of school and out of high school. And my mom was a bookkeeper. I didn't know what she did, but I just looked at her and I thought, I don't know what that is, but I know I don't want to do that. My my
Yeah.
dad was an architect,
Huh.
and he would take me to some of his job sites that seemed cool. So, I applied to UT. I got in. I didn't know, so I thought, well, I'll be an architect.
Sure.
So I applied and got in the architecture school, and it was a different world. I got up to
Yeah.
UT, and I joined a fraternity, which was not good for me. It was like Animal House,
Right.
and that didn't work well with being in the School of Architecture. And I did that for a couple of years. I really liked it, but realized that probably wasn't the best career track for me. And I switched into the business school and specifically to get a finance degree. And at that time, I still didn't really know about public accounting or anything like that, but they had said, hey, it's good for you if you take a lot of accounting classes, we'll help you to get a job. So I was loading up on a lot of accounting classes, and I thought, well, I'll get a dual degree. Um, and so I was started taking that, and fortunately, a friend of mine that I'd met in my freshman year is the one who told me about public accounting in Anderson, and I ended up interviewing, with that, switching over.
And you ended up spending 12 years at Anderson, right? Now
I
we've got a
did.
lot we got a lot to cover from your career. And so we can't go into depth at all of it, but that was a pretty good chunk. Um, and of course, you got out before the Enron days and all of that. It's kind of infamous in Houston that Anderson there, but it was a great firm back in the day. Lots of smart people, really big, interesting projects. What are some of the things you learned through that process?
You know, I it was for me, it was a work hard, play hard type of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
The Houston office in particular, where you were, was a large office. We probably hired 150 people a year. I think we
yeah,
had 1,200 to 1,500 people, and it was a great place to start a career, and for me, a great place to build a career. I was part of the financial services group and helped to build a structured finance practice there. We're doing a lot of work with asset-backed securities, and um, I was fortunate. Some of the partners and principals I worked with, I really liked a lot. I enjoyed a lot of the staff that I worked with, like you and others. And um, yeah, and so it was a place where I learned to really work hard.
yeah,
It taught me to think creatively and analytically. Um, and it's people will think of, say, accounting as just cut and dry, black and white.
right.
But a lot of times you have to think outside the box, and that structured finance practice that we built was definitely like that. We took something that our New York office had, we changed it up a fair amount. Don't have time to go into all that, but
Yeah.
really created something different from that and built a pretty good practice with that.
And after 12 years, you did leave, and this you really had a niche going in that structured finance world. And I remember I worked on a couple of your jobs, and I
Yeah.
really when we met a few months ago, and I've heard the story obviously before we started recording this. Maybe just take us through a little bit of the that career post Anderson, what that was like, kind of moving from financial firm to financial firm, kind of using those skills. Can you take us through that part of the career a little bit?
Sure. At that time, it seemed like the partner track at Anderson was 15 years or so, and
Yeah,
I enjoyed what I was doing, and that I was kind of planning on being on that path. One of my clients that I worked with a lot had left, and he'd worked for an investment bank, and he was talking to me about joining him. And he and I were going down that path. And about the same time, I reconnected with another friend of mine who worked over at Enron. And this is 4 years before all of that went
yeah,
down with Enron. And at that time, Enron was like the number one place. It was on Fortune magazine's number one best place to work in the country, most innovative company in the country. And anyway, I was having lunch with a friend of mine, and we are just kind of catching up. And she had been at Anderson. She and I worked together over there, and then actually was over at Enron. And I told her I was looking to leave. She was like, "Gosh, if you're looking to leave, you should come to work for us." And she connected me with a number of people, and and really within probably 4 weeks or so, I had an offer to go to work over there. And I remember going back and working with a partner that was really a mentor for me at Anderson. And, just telling him that I was going to work over there and him just saying, well, I don't guess I can do anything to get you to stay because that was like the place to go. And I said, no. And it was a great opportunity. I was not in the accounting area. They had investment portfolio of small companies that were growing. And there were people that were, I remember we were helping to manage these and grow these small companies. And it was a real interesting group. I was part of Enron Capital and Trade, which was their merchant banking part. And at that time, people that, a lot of people have heard of, Jeffrey Skilling and Andy Fastow and others, I was, in a small group, 8-person portfolio management committee with these guys. And it was really exciting,
Hmm.
being part of that. And still, it was part of a big company. And I was in that for about 6 months and actually ended up connecting with another person I knew that I knew outside of this. And she was involved in the structured finance world, but more through an investment, an insurance subsidiary. And she, we get together at kind of kids' birthday parties and different things that we're at, social things. And we would talk about what I was doing, what she was doing. And she asked me to come by and meet with them. And she was part of a small, kind of a startup company. It was an equipment finance company called First Sierra Financial. And, in the midst of talking with her, I thought I was going to help. She was looking for a person to come to work for them. And then it became obvious that they were looking for me to come to work there. And,
Right.
and really, I had the perfect background. They were
Yeah,
looking to go public, which I had done at Anderson. I'd helped clients go public. They were using structured finance for that. And
totally.
that's kind of what I did. And they were also, what their plan was to do more of a roll-up type structure, going and buying companies and pulling it in. And at Anderson, I'd worked with a few roll-up companies and
Right.
helping to take them public. So it wasn't that I was special, but I had a perfect background for what they were doing. And so they, I remember going to their office. They were on the 70th floor of the Chase Tower there, and
Yep.
is this beautiful office looking down on downtown, and had a corner office looking at Enron. And I'm 35, and man, they made me a really good deal to come over, and I thought, wow, this is it.
I've
And
made it.
yeah, and people were like, what are you doing? Nobody leaves Enron. And I thought,
Right.
at the time, I thought Enron was a big company, and their goal at the time was to go up by 15% a year, which is, I mean, that would be really good for a big company.
Right.
But I thought I had a chance to join a small company. We had 40 people at the time and grow this and, it's still swing for the fences. And so I made a move over there.
And did you ultimately take that public? I know it ended up
We
selling to
did.
American Express, right? It went public and then you sold. Was that what happened?
I went with them kind of pre-IPO and worked with the investment bankers and wrote a lot of the S1, the
This one.
registration statement. One thing I'm really proud of that, our investment bankers told you when we submitted our S1, we only had, I think it was like 19 comments back from the SEC. It
Yeah.
was less than 2 dozen. And they said, we've never seen so few comments come back from the SEC, which we got cleared very quickly. But yeah, so we went public. We did a secondary offering. We bought 25 companies around the
Wow.
US and the UK. I went out and I worked with a lot of those companies and integrating them.
Yeah.
And it was, again, long hours. It was hard work, but it was good work. And um, it was interesting. That was part of my journey too. It was like our stock price went up and then it came down and went up
Right.
and came down. There's some reasons for that. I ended up making a shift to, I was chief accounting officer, away from that to being more of a VP of strategic initiatives and kind of working, with our sales business development team and our technology and our operations group in integrating companies in. We were setting up vendor finance programs for companies and working with large companies like Stryker Medical and Sensormatic Electronics and some other really big
Yeah.
companies, and we would provide the back end financing
Gotcha.
for them. And that's ultimately what led me to be able to come to Denver was to help start another company up with through that company that I came here to help lead.
Yeah.
Um,
And so you're going through this. You help take this company public. You're doing all these acquisitions. You have I mean, to me, you have this is sort of what all the people we grew up with in public accounting. This is kind of the dream scenario setting up here, in my opinion. Okay. I mean, the only thing that could be better is maybe the stock just went up and stayed up forever, and you cash out at whatever, 5x. But you're on this amazing trajectory. You've got this amazing resume. I mean, this thing has public company CFO written all over it, in my opinion. I mean, I knew you. I would have bet on that all day long. But at some place along the way, you started kind of getting the itch to do something in the nonprofit world. And we were just talking before we started recording about how Bob Buford with halftime and this sort of thing, where they're talking about success to significance. And, most people kind of wait until they maybe make the big hit financially, or yeah, kind of shift later in life to do something or that sort of thing. But you made a shift kind of in your late 40s. What was kind of going on? Take us through that period, maybe the last few years of working, and then maybe how God was working on you about doing something different.
yeah, good question. It's interesting. I was with that company. I came to Colorado. A whole other story about some stuff that happened then, which was really a God thing for another time. But um, we got here. American Express bought our company. I stayed on with them for another 4 years. I left that company, and a friend of mine had a small technology company. And after I left American Express, he asked me if I would come help him, which I did. Um, and uh, went over there as CFO and kind of helped him grow his company. And but the other thing that was happening about the same time back in 1999, while I was still in Houston, you mentioned the stock. Our stock came out at 8. We went to 32, and then there was something that happened. It wasn't an issue with our company, but another company in our sector, and the stock came down. And then we rebranded our company as a .com company. We changed the name from First Sierra Financial to sierracities.com. We hired a couple of our investment bankers. We kind of inside we called them our ministers of propaganda, and they sold the company. The stock's
That's what was
going up
going
again,
on.
and
Yeah.
it looks good. And so it almost was like the story of like how not to do things in a way. But I remember, being kind of promised that I was going to get certain things and then not getting that. And then I'm thinking, we had what on paper looked like a good life. We had bought an old house over by Rice University in Houston,
Yep.
redid it, the kids in private school. I'm driving the late model BMW. And so it looks good, but I'm thinking, why am I doing all of this? I'm never home, never with the kids. And our church had they were promoting a mission trip to Africa. And I just thought, I'm going to sign up. I need to do something for somebody else. And I don't know what to do, but if I sign up, I'll do anything and they'll tell me what to do. So I did that. And I'll tell you what, we went to Kenya. We were working in slum areas. We worked in some of the slum areas, and then we were also working with the Maasai and just beautiful people. And it just completely changed my world. And I came back and, got involved with a church there in Houston. And they asked me to, uh, help be part of a capital raising campaign to do not with the raising money, but actually to put on I put on this digital video thing of our trip, and they asked me to speak about how it changed my life to our elder board and to our congregation. And they asked me to do something with this capital campaign, but I'm sitting on that, and listening to people talk about giving in a completely different way. I'd never thought about it like this. And before that, I was giving, but I look back at it, I was really more tipping. I was just giving off the top and thinking, wow, the first time I really heard about tithing, I thought I'd like to do that, but I can't do that. We built up this life for ourselves.
Right.
I thought, I could sell it. We could sell the house and move to the burbs, but not really going to do that. And it was like a year later having an opportunity to move to Colorado. And when we moved, I told my wife, Steph, like, hey, I want to restructure our lives so that we can do things differently. And anyway, we did that and kind of got into tithing and giving more and got real involved with just a wonderful church here in Colorado when we moved. And got very involved, and through that was invited to. I ended up leading another trip to going on a couple more trips to Kenya, and I led one from our church. And through that, was invited to be on a board of a small nonprofit called the Street School Network, and we had a network of about 45 schools for at-risk kids around the country, and which I look back at that, and whenever I would travel for work, and if we had a school in a city, I would go by and talk with these people. And these were people like living on the poverty line, like the people who ran these schools. Man, they're really making a difference. And what I was doing in the for-profit world, where I mean, there's nothing bad about it, but we're looking at the stock price or what our
Right.
compensation was or what can we do. And I came back and felt a little, vacant in that. And again, I was fortunate to be with my friend's company for about, I was with his company for 5 years, and I helped to um, really position his company so that he ultimately sold his company to Aero Electronics, and he was able to retire. And I just started feeling like I wanted to do something to give back.
Yeah.
And heard a halftime and heard people talk about that. And I was, in approaching my late 40s and thought, what am I doing? How can I do that? And
Hmm.
so, ended up leaving that job, with the technology company. I look back, I resigned in 2009, which looking back, not the best time to quit your job. And, we, it kind of took a couple of years. I did some consulting over that time period, and my wife asking me, like, what are you doing? What do you want to do? Because
Yeah.
I was like, not a shipper without a rudder, but not a clear direction. And we're part of a great small group, and she had reached out to our small group leader, who's a great friend and a mentor, and he and I having lunch, and he's like, where are you headed? And he really helped to encourage me, and thought, I think I'd like to go to work for a nonprofit or do something ministry focused. And um, yeah, and I remember being at what was one of the lowest times for me, and just hearing God speak to me and saying, kind of a replay of my life
Yeah.
of here's a time where I thought something bad was going to happen and things worked out okay. And then another thing, and then it worked out okay. And I remember, almost like this, in the Bible, it says, frequently remember, remember. And
Mm.
just going through these steps where I thought things weren't going to go well and it worked out okay. And the only time I've heard, felt like God was audibly speaking, I don't know if he actually did or if it was just in my head, but God saying, I've always been with you and I'm with you now. Just abide in me. And I just felt this peace come over me. It was like this supernatural peace come over
Yeah.
me. And within 2 weeks, a woman who was a friend and she was part of this nonprofit that I was on the board of, within 2 weeks, she called, we got my wife and I, we put our, when I told her I wanted to go to work for a nonprofit, she's like, well, do it. I'm like, well, we can't, we're living in a great house.
Yeah.
I'm like, we can't stay here
Right.
and me go to work for a nonprofit. It's just a different salary scale. And she's like, we can sell the house. I'm like, really? And
Yeah.
so shout out to my wife because she was
Yes.
right there. I'm like, she's like, yeah. So we put the house on the market. And so anyway, I'm having this insight presence from the Lord. He's saying, abide in me. And within 2 weeks, we got an offer
Yes.
for our house. And
Wow.
I got an offer to join this other company, a nonprofit company, where we're working with, these inner city kids and helping to start schools there. And it was just a real blessing.
I mean, there's so many good things about what just that process of kind of just listening, maybe that little voice in your head just to go on a mission trip. Like, I got to do something. Like, I mean, like, and then it's sort of like the reward for pursuing the things of God is more desire for the things of God. Then he sort of surrounds you with these people. He kind of opens up a world that you didn't really know about, generosity and doing more and the nonprofit world. And then next thing you know, you're on a nonprofit board, and then you're starting to uh, get more intimacy with Christ. And then he communicates and he sort of gently shows you maybe the good and bad and directionally gives you this. And then he gave you a spouse who's super aligned in this. That's amazing because you were talking about how she didn't necessarily, she grew up, your wife, with some resources. So for her to be so encouraging, that affects her too, right? Whatever
Yeah.
job you select. So I just think that was a real gift that God gave you, is her and her perspective to be aligned in that. And I think a lot of people fear moving backwards financially. And the reason I really I want the world to hear your story. We're friends and I love you, but beyond that, I think uh, the world you and I came up from in sort of public accounting, where that was kind of the goal. You're either going to make partner and do well, or you're going to use it as a springboard to eventually kind of work your way up to be a, big public company CFO type thing, maybe even run. And really, what we're really saying is we want a big paycheck. Okay, use these sort of technical financial. And so, what I think is fascinating is this sort of obedience. You've been operating for a long time under a different scorecard than that one that we were sort of taught in that world. Um, and so your ability to operate in a different way and not just wait for the big payday or go get it, let me go get another CFO job until I get the big hit. God, I know you're speaking to me about something else and I'm abiding and you're telling me to do something. I just want other people to, if somebody is kind of hearing that same voice that you're hearing, which I'd really like you to make a shift, get closer to me, maybe downshift financially. Is it as hard as it looks? How's that been? I mean, like unpack that a little bit. I mean, you say it like it's, hey, my wife said okay, so we did it. Like, I think for most people that is wildly scary. What has it been like?
Well, I just I want to say, because we've been incredibly blessed in many, many ways.
Yeah,
And one of the things that always helped me is, we would travel, and especially some of the schools that we started and the
yeah.
places that we go, and I'd see the people doing that. And I'm thinking how much more that I have than those people.
Yeah, even after the downshift financially, I mean, you're using one of the coolest things is you're using all the skills, right? So you're still engaged with all the skills God gave you. I think that's super cool. The strategy, the financial skills, all those things. You're putting them fully to work, as we were talking before we started recording. You're just working for less money, frankly, in a little more directly meaningful uh,
Yeah.
business, if you will. It just happens to be a non-profit. But I love this exposure that you're talking about to people with less. So you're like, okay, great. I went from here to here financially, but I mean, I'm not, the
Yeah.
way
When
you're
I'm,
describing it's not really sacrificially, you know?
well, there were times like when we sold our house,
Yeah.
we did.
Yeah.
And I was still not working. And then I went to work for a nonprofit, making less than half of what I was
Right.
making before. And, and feeling thankful for that. And we went into a rental, and we rented for 7 years. And there's the voice that plays in your head,
Mm-hmm.
especially that, we live in a Douglas County in Colorado, and people around us that are very affluent.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of the house that we lived in, back in Houston, and the house that we
Yeah.
sold here in Colorado. And I'm thinking I'm not a good provider, I'm not a good husband, and
Right.
we're over here. That was the big thing that I had to fight
Yes.
is that my wife never, she is just amazing.
Yes. She
She never
wasn't putting
said
that on you.
anything.
That was you putting that on you.
It was me and feeling like I'm not doing
100%.
that. And then still thinking I need to keep going down this path of
Yes.
just being obedient to God. And, if it ever comes again, it does. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But we still have more than, the vast majority of the people out there. So that's what really helped in that, I think.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
just think that's it's counter to the way the world thinks. And that's why I wanted people to hear that when I spend time with you, I know the peace that you have. I sense a peace with you. I don't sense. I mean, we all are human and have our moments. I know that, but can you talk about that? I mean, do you feel mostly at peace now about this?
Well, it's something that I continue to work on.
Of course.
But I'm really feeling a lot more so. And really I'm fortunate to have great friends and a great community and a great
Yeah.
church and family and, a great God, which is all of it, and just trying
Yes.
to be more aligned with Him and following in that path. I'll say something that was very transformational for me. Really, almost 6 years ago, my daughter bought me this book, The Relentless Elimination of Hurry by John
Hmm.
Mark Comer.
Hmm.
And, going into the new year, and then the pandemic hits, and I started reading that, and it really just resonated with me in a lot of ways. And I was thinking of, a lot, it's about eliminating hurry in our life, which is something that Dallas Willard had told to John Ortberg, who then passed along to John Mark Comer, and he wrote a book about that. But it's more than that. It's how do we become a closer, like from a disciple to Jesus, and what does that really look like? And discipleship had been on my mind for a bit. We got pretty involved with missions in our church. And the big thing from a mission standpoint, a lot of people look at Matthew 28, the Great Commission of go and make disciples with the emphasis on go, kind of go out to all the nations. And I'm definitely a believer in that. I think that's really important. But as I thought about it more, it was like make disciples. And what is discipleship like? And what was that? How was that modeled by Jesus and his discipleship? It wasn't an easy thing. It was a 3-year process of coming alongside and an intentional process. And so that's what I got from John Mark's book. And I've, since, followed other practices that he has. And he has a great website called practicingtheway.org that,
Yeah.
I've helped to facilitate some courses that they offer. But that's really helped me to, in my discipleship journey, and it's brought a lot more peace into my life.
No, thanks for sharing that. No, I mean, you exude peace. Actually, I've always think you've handled stress well. I was always even many years ago, I always thought you handled a very intense job with a lot of grace. I think God's given you really the gift of sort of seeing through the noise a little bit for what it is. And I also just appreciate how your honesty about the struggle. None of us have all this figured out, and we're just kind of one beggar showing another beggar where they got a piece of bread here. So I just really thank you for sharing this. And as we kind of start wrapping up, Craig, I'm just thinking about somebody behind you on this journey, who maybe they're having that little whisper in their ear that, and they may be at a different age and stage, but they're worried maybe about the finances or whatever it is, and they maybe don't want to listen to that voice. I mean, what just what's some practical tip or advice that you might give them as we wrap?
Yeah, thanks. I think part of it is just be open to learning. And I
Mm,
think some of these things take time.
Yeah.
When I first heard about tithing, I think part of it is I was open to hearing about it
Yeah.
and learning.
Yeah.
I didn't start it immediately, but I thought
Right.
I'd like to do that. And then God presented an opportunity for us to kind of go into that. Um, I heard about the Sabbath, gosh, back in the mid 2000s, from another friend who's a pastor down in Houston through a book that he wrote, and it got me thinking about it. But it was probably almost a good 15 years before I really started implementing that, and that's changed my life. So I think part of it is just being open. Hopefully, don't take as long as it's taken me in some of these things, and then one of the things that I love about where I am right now with Parent Possible and before this with Generation Schools Network is, I think that God has given me, skills and talents that are uniquely me, and that I'm able to use those same things now, but just in a different way. And I did that on a board before, and I'm doing it through this nonprofit now. So there's a lot of ways that we can use that. Um, there's I kind of host a table group at our men's Bible study at our church, and we got a couple of business owners there, and some younger guys, and they're talking. There's one guy in particular who's Steve is, really wants to mentor men in a for-profit business world, and so we're kind of talking about how do you do that, and for some people like me, it might be leaving that for-profit company for not a nonprofit or ministry. Others, it's operating that way within where you are, which I think is very God affirming on doing that. Uh,
I think that's right on the money. We were talking about that earlier, before we started recording it's one of the reasons I wanted everybody to hear your story is that we're not trying to be prescriptive. Sometimes we have business owners on and they're thinking deeply about, how do I keep the business and implement, how do I behave in a godly manner toward all constituents, my employees, the customers, everybody. How do I handle the profits and giving? Okay, that's all great. And God might tell them to keep that business for 4 generations. I hope
yeah,
everybody's obedient. Okay. Other people might be told to build it up and sell it. That's okay. Other people might just have a regular job working for somebody else as a CFO forever, and they're supposed to be on Wall Street. And how do they behave as an investment banking? If God tells you to do that, you should do it. And if He whispers in your ear, take your skills and go do it for the nonprofit world when you're 49, like you did, you should do that. So I think what we're advocating for, I like what you said, which is being open to learning. Maybe not have a preconceived notion in your flesh about what this might look like. And I know when I was hesitant to listen to God's call on that, I thought His way would not be as much fun or as lucrative as mine, and I wanted both. Okay, but what ended up happening is the fun went away as I just pursued my own path and just following Him by what I learned over time, and clearly you've learned this, is following Him is actually the path to joy. He understands that path better than we do for
amen.
ourselves. So to trust in what He's telling you, and I like this, be open to learning what His path for you might be. And this engagement at halftime would call it low cost probes, right? Like get on a board, take a mission trip. You don't have to you don't have to become the biggest giver to a thing. You don't have to change jobs immediately, but just start exploring these things that God puts in your path and go deeper with Him. And
Yeah,
that's what you've done, and it's been a real joy to watch you reach that place of peace on a different scorecard. So thanks so much for that.
yeah. Thank you, Jeff. You've definitely been an inspiration, and I love how, you took your faith and, within at Morgan Stanley and where you've been, it's like, that was still part of you. And then you took that and created your own firm, and you're still doing great work, which is God honoring. I mean, we're called to be the best examples of what it looked like to serve with integrity. Um,
Well, thank you for that. And anyway, thanks so much, Greg, for sharing your story. I know it'll be a blessing to many.
yeah, thank you, Jeff.
And thanks everybody for listening to this week's Generous Business Owner podcast. Subscribe on YouTube, share it with a friend, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.